Imagine a universe where every alien species follows the same ancient rule: civilized beings negotiate, trade, and solve conflicts through diplomacy. Wars are brief, surgical affairs with predetermined outcomes based on mathematical probabilities. Death tolls are calculated in advance, surrender terms agreed upon before the first shot is fired. Then, humanity stumbles onto the galactic stage. The Zephyrian Dominion had conquered 47 star systems using this elegant system. Their opening shot at the human colony of New Terra was meant to be a formality, a demonstration that would lead to immediate surrender negotiations, as it had for centuries with every other species they encountered. They expected humans to calculate their odds, accept the inevitable, and submit to superior firepower like rational beings. They had never encountered a species that didn't know when to quit. What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humans have a very different relationship with impossible odds. Where other species saw mathematical certainty of defeat, humans saw a challenge. Where others saw overwhelming enemy force, humans saw a target. The Zephyrians fired one shot to start negotiations. Humanity responded with a declaration that would echo across the galaxy for millennia: "You want to see what Relentless really looks like?" This is the story of what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object and discovered that sometimes the immovable object has nuclear weapons, an industrial base that turns entire planets into weapons factories, and a pathological inability to surrender. The galaxy was about to learn why humans don't have a word for acceptable losses. Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Dominion stood before the massive holographic display aboard his flagship, the Inexorable Tide. The three-dimensional star map showed their target system in perfect detail: a yellow star with 8 planets, the third one teeming with the peculiar electromagnetic signatures that indicated the presence of the newest species to stumble into Dominion space. Humans, he said the word like it left a bitter taste in his mouth. The species had been observed for exactly 73 standard cycles since their first crude faster-than-light vessels had been detected. They had established colonies on 17 worlds, built a modest fleet of primitive warships, and somehow convinced themselves they were players on the galactic stage. It would have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. Fleet Commander Zelvar approached from behind, his forearms clasped in the traditional gesture of deference. "Admiral, our scouts report the human colony world designated New Terra has a population of approximately 12 million sentients. Their defensive fleet consists of 37 vessels, none larger than a light cruiser by Dominion standards." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The mathematics were perfect, as always. The Dominion's pacification protocol had been refined over 8 centuries and 47 successful campaigns. A single demonstration of superior firepower, followed by the presentation of terms, resulted in unconditional surrender within 6 standard hours. It was efficient, elegant, and, above all, predictable. What of their industrial capacity? The Admiral asked, though he already knew the answer. The reconnaissance reports had been thorough. "Minimal, sir. Some mining operations, basic manufacturing facilities, nothing that could pose a threat to Dominion interests. Their largest settlement appears to be built around something they call a university. Our xenobiologists believe it's some sort of knowledge preservation facility." The Admiral's secondary eyes studied the tactical display. New Terra hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its single moon providing a convenient staging point for the demonstration. The human fleet was arranged in a defensive formation that showed they at least understood basic military principles, even if their technology was laughably primitive. "Signal the fleet," Kethvar commanded. "We begin the protocol in 1 standard hour. Target selection?" The humans have constructed what appears to be a defensive satellite network around their primary city. Destroying one satellite should provide adequate demonstration without significant loss of civilian life. This was crucial. The Dominion had learned long ago that excessive civilian casualties in the opening demonstration often led to irrational behavior from the target species. A precise, surgical strike that demonstrated technological superiority while minimizing actual damage was far more effective at encouraging surrender. "Excellent. Broadcast the standard pacification message on all frequencies. Ensure their primitive communication systems can receive it." As the fleet moved into position, Kethvar reflected on how smoothly this campaign had proceeded. The Zephyrians had encountered 43 different sapient species in their expansion across the galaxy, and the protocol had worked perfectly with each one. Mathematics was universal, after all. Any rational species could calculate probability, weigh the cost of resistance against the certainty of defeat, and make the logical choice. The communication officer's voice echoed across the bridge. "Admiral, the pacification message has been transmitted. We're receiving responses from multiple human vessels." "Are they requesting terms?" "Not exactly, sir. The messages appear to be questions." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in confusion. Questions were not part of the protocol. Species either surrendered immediately or requested specific surrender terms. What could there be to question? "Display the messages." The holographic screen filled with text in the crude human language. The translation algorithms had decoded them into Zephyrian script, but the meaning was puzzling. "Who the hell are you and what do you want? Are you seriously threatening us with that ancient piece of junk? Bring it on, you overgrown insects. Is this some kind of joke?" Kethvar stared at the messages, his secondary brain trying to process what he was seeing. These weren't surrender requests. They weren't even proper diplomatic responses. They were... "Sir?" Fleet Commander Zelthar's voice carried a note of uncertainty that was deeply troubling. "How should we respond?" "We proceed with the protocol," the Admiral said firmly. "Some species require the demonstration before they understand the situation. Target the satellite as planned." The inexorable tide's primary weapon systems hummed to life. The ship's massive particle beam array, capable of cracking a small moon, focused on a single human defensive satellite. It was remarkable overkill, but that was the point. The demonstration had to be unmistakable. "Firing," reported the weapons officer. The particle beam lanced across space in a brilliant blue-white line. The human satellite disappeared in a flash of vaporized metal and plasma. Where sophisticated defensive technology had existed moments before, there was now only an expanding cloud of superheated gas. "Perfect execution," Kethvar observed with satisfaction. "Now we wait for their response. They should be requesting terms within the hour." But the human response came much sooner than expected, and it was nothing like what the Admiral had anticipated. Every human ship in the system suddenly accelerated toward the Dominion fleet. Not retreating, not requesting parley, but attacking. Their crude missile systems began launching projectiles across impossible distances, apparently hoping to score lucky hits on Dominion vessels. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice was strained, "they're actually engaging us." "Impossible," Kethvar snapped. "They cannot possibly believe they can win. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their fleet is outnumbered 3-1. The mathematics are clear." But the evidence was right there on the tactical display. 37 human vessels charging directly at a Dominion fleet that could reduce their homeworld to molten slag. It was not just irrational, it was suicide. "Are they perhaps conducting some ritual before surrender?" suggested Fleet Commander Zeldar. "Some species have unusual ceremonial requirements." Before the Admiral could respond, the first human missiles reached the outer perimeter of the Dominion formation. The primitive nuclear weapons detonated against the energy shields of a Dominion light cruiser, causing minor fluctuations in the defensive grid. Then, something unprecedented happened. The human missiles kept coming. Not one or two more, as might be expected from a species making a token gesture of resistance, but hundreds of them. The humans appeared to be throwing everything they had at the Dominion fleet, as if they genuinely believed they could win. "Admiral," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human planet." "Are they requesting terms?" "No, sir. It appears to be a message from their planetary government." The message appeared on the main screen, translated from the human language. Admiral Kethvar read it 3 times before he could believe what he was seeing. "To the alien fleet currently attacking our system, you have fired upon human civilians and destroyed human property. This constitutes an act of war. We do not recognize your authority, we do not acknowledge your superiority, and we do not accept your terms, whatever they might be. You want our world? Come and take it." But, understand this, every meter of ground will cost you. Every building will have to be taken by force. Every human you face will fight you with everything we have until our last breath. You started this war. We'll finish it. Signed, President Sarah Chen, New Terra Colonial Government. The bridge fell silent. In 8 centuries of Dominion expansion, no species had ever sent a message like this after the demonstration. It was not just defiance, it was a complete rejection of the fundamental premise that mathematical certainty determined the outcome of conflicts. Sir, the tactical officer reported, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the human homeworld. They appear to be mobilizing their entire population. For evacuation? Fleet Commander Zeldar asked hopefully. No, sir. For war production. They're converting civilian facilities to military manufacturing at an unprecedented rate. And, sir, they're launching everything they have. Not just their military fleet, but civilian ships, cargo haulers, even what appear to be converted passenger transports. All armed, all heading directly for us. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were escalating. Where any rational species would have recognized the hopelessness of their situation and sought terms, the humans appeared to be doubling down on resistance. What is their casualty threshold? He demanded. Every species has a point at which they recognize defeat. What are our xenobiologist projections for human surrender conditions? Zeldar consulted his data tablet, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Sir, that's the problem. According to our analysis, humans appear to have no mathematically predictable surrender threshold. Their historical records show conflicts where they continued fighting even when facing certain annihilation. In some cases, they fought harder when the odds became worse. The Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of severe agitation. This was not supposed to be possible. Mathematics was universal. Logic was universal. The concept of acceptable losses was fundamental to any sapient species' survival instinct. Sir, the weapons officer interrupted, the human ships are getting closer. Their missile attacks are intensifying. And, sir, some of their ships appear to be on suicide vectors. They're planning to ram us. Admiral Kethvar watched the tactical display with growing horror as the mathematical certainty of the situation began to crumble. The humans weren't just resisting, they were doing so in ways that violated every principle of rational warfare the Dominion had encountered in 8 centuries of expansion. On the main screen, more messages from human ships began appearing. None of them were surrender requests. This is Captain Martinez of the UES Defiance. You want to see what Defiance looks like? Follow me in. Trading post vessel Lucky Strike requesting permission to ram the nearest hostile. We've got a full cargo hold of mining explosives and a really bad attitude. University research ship Stephen Hawking to all vessels, we're transmitting our complete scientific database to Earth. If these bastards think they can destroy human knowledge, they're about to learn something new about determination. The Admiral realized with growing dread that the protocol wasn't just failing, it was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of intimidating the humans into surrender, the demonstration had apparently made them angry. And angry humans, it seemed, were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Signal the fleet, he commanded, his voice tight with strain. Prepare for full engagement. It appears these humans require a more thorough demonstration of Dominion superiority. But, even as he gave the order, Admiral Kethvar couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had gone wrong. The humans were reacting to overwhelming force not with fear or rational calculation, but with rage and determination. They were treating certain defeat not as a reason to surrender, but as a challenge to exceed their limitations. For the first time in 8 centuries, the Dominion had encountered a species that didn't know when to quit. And that realization filled Admiral Kethvar with a cold dread that no amount of technological superiority could dispel. 3 weeks after the first shot was fired at New Terra, Admiral Kethvar stood in the same position on his bridge, but everything else had changed. The pristine holographic displays now showed a tactical nightmare that violated every principle of warfare he had learned in his 2 centuries of military service. The human resistance wasn't collapsing. It was growing. "Fleet status report," he commanded, though he dreaded the answer. Fleet Commander Zelvar approached with the cautious gait of someone delivering news that could result in execution. "Admiral, we have lost the cruiser dominant will to a human ramming attack." The destroyer's swift compliance suffered critical damage when human vessels detonated nuclear devices at close range. "And, sir." "Continue." "The humans have begun modifying their civilian vessels into what can only be described as flying bombs. They're loading cargo ships with nuclear material and deliberately targeting our largest vessels." Kethvar's secondary eyes focused on the tactical display. Where the Dominion fleet had originally faced 37 human military vessels, they now confronted nearly 300 ships of various sizes and configurations. Mining vessels bristling with improvised weapons. Passenger transports converted into troop carriers. Even scientific research ships had been fitted with military hardware. "How is this possible?" the admiral demanded. "Our intelligence indicated limited industrial capacity." "Sir, the humans appear to have abandoned all normal industrial safety protocols. They're converting their entire civilization into a war machine. Factories that produced consumer goods are now manufacturing weapons. Research facilities are developing new technologies. Even their educational institutions have been converted to military training centers." This was beyond the admiral's comprehension. The Dominion's own war machine was vast and efficient, but it operated according to established protocols and safety margins. No rational species would sacrifice their entire civilian infrastructure for a military campaign they couldn't possibly win. What about their homeworld? Surely they must be protecting their population centers. Zelvar's forearms shifted in a gesture of deep uncertainty. "Admiral, this is where the situation becomes unprecedented. The humans aren't protecting their homeworld. They're using it as a base to launch more attacks against us." The tactical display shifted to show the human home system. Earth blazed with industrial activity that defied belief. Massive orbital shipyards were producing vessels at a rate that should have been impossible for a species of their technological level. The planet's surface showed the heat signatures of countless manufacturing facilities working at maximum capacity. "Sir," the intelligence officer interrupted, "we've decoded more human communications. Their government has issued something called War Production Order Omega. All civilian manufacturing has been converted to military purposes. They're drafting their entire adult population into either combat or war production roles." Admiral Kethvar stared at the data in disbelief. Their entire population? What about their economy? Their social structure? Their quality of life? "Sir, they appear to have suspended all of that. The human leadership is operating under the assumption that nothing matters except defeating our forces. They've literally turned their entire civilization into a weapon." This was madness. No species could sustain such an effort for any meaningful period. The social and economic costs would be catastrophic. The humans were essentially committing civilization-wide suicide to continue a war they couldn't win. "Show me their casualty reports," the admiral commanded. The data that appeared made his mandibles click in shock. Human losses were enormous by any rational standard. They had lost nearly 40% of their original fleet, suffered significant civilian casualties from Dominion bombardments, and their economy was in complete chaos. And yet their resistance was intensifying. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human government." "Terms of surrender?" "No, sir. It appears to be a general broadcast to all human forces." The message played across the bridge speakers, translated into Zephyrian. The voice belonged to the same human leader who had sent the first defiant message. "Citizens of humanity, this is President Chen with an update on our war against the Zephyrian Dominion. Yes, we have suffered losses. Yes, the enemy possesses technological advantages. Yes, the odds against us are mathematically overwhelming. But I want every human listening to this broadcast to remember one thing: we have never been a species that accepted impossible odds as an excuse to surrender. When our ancestors faced extinction from climate change, they built ships and sailed across impossible oceans. When they faced disease and starvation, they developed medicine and agriculture. When they faced the limitations of their home planet, they reached for the stars. We are the children of survivors, the descendants of beings who looked at impossible odds and said, "Try and stop us." Today, an alien empire has fired the opening shot in what they assumed would be a brief, one-sided campaign. They expect us to calculate our chances, recognize the futility of resistance, and surrender like rational beings. They don't understand that humanity has never been rational about impossible odds. We see them as challenges to overcome, not reasons to quit. So let every human ship captain know, you are authorized to use any means necessary to destroy the enemy. Let every human factory worker know, your production quotas have been doubled, and failure is not an option. Let every human citizen know, we are not fighting for victory in the traditional sense. We are fighting to show this galaxy that there are some species you simply cannot conquer. The Dominion expects us to behave like every other species they've encountered. They want us to be reasonable, predictable, and, ultimately submissive. Instead, we're going to show them what Relentless actually looks like. Earth stands. Humanity endures. And, we will never, ever surrender. The bridge fell silent. Admiral Kethvar had heard surrender speeches from dozens of species. He had received diplomatic overtures from countless civilizations seeking terms. He had never heard anything like this. Analysis, he commanded. Sir, the xenopsychologist stepped forward, our models predict that this level of total war mobilization will result in complete societal collapse within 6 standard months. The humans cannot sustain this effort. Their population will either revolt against their leadership or their industrial base will completely break down. And, until then? Until then, sir, they will continue producing more ships, more weapons, and more soldiers than should be mathematically possible. And, sir, our projections indicate they may actually achieve local numerical superiority within 8 weeks. The Admiral's mandibles snapped shut in shock. Local numerical superiority? Against a Dominion fleet? The concept was absurd. Impossible. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are inferior. Yes, sir, but they're building them faster than we can destroy them. And, sir, they're learning. Each new wave of human ships incorporates improvements based on data from previous engagements. Their latest vessels show technological advances that should have taken them decades to achieve. Fleet Commander Zeldar activated a secondary display showing captured human communications. Admiral, they're treating this conflict as what they call accelerated evolution. They're using each defeat as a learning opportunity. Every ship we destroy provides them with data about our weapons, our tactics, our capabilities. And, they're adapting faster than any species we've encountered. The tactical display updated with new contacts. Another wave of human ships was approaching, but these looked different from the crude modifications of previous weeks. The vessels showed sleeker lines, improved armor configurations, and weapon systems that appeared far more sophisticated than anything in the human technological database. How did they develop these improvements so quickly? Admiral Kethvar demanded. Sir, intelligence suggests they've abandoned all normal research and development protocols. They're using live combat data to refine their designs in real time. They're essentially using our own fleet as a testing ground for rapid technological development. The Admiral stared at the approaching human fleet with growing dread. Each wave was larger than the last, better armed, and more sophisticated. The humans were somehow turning their inevitable defeats into stepping stones toward technological parity. Sir, the tactical officer interrupted, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy buildups in the human home system. They appear to be constructing something unprecedented. The display shifted to show Earth's orbital space. Massive structures were taking shape around the planet, their purpose unclear but their scale enormous. Whatever the humans were building, it was larger than anything in the Dominion's database of known megastructures. What are our xeno-engineering team's assessment? Sir, they have no idea what the humans are constructing. The power requirements alone exceed the total output of most star systems. And, sir, the construction rate suggests they're using technologies we don't recognize. Admiral Kethvar felt a cold certainty settling in his primary brain. The Dominion had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They had calculated based on the assumption that humans would behave like every other rational species when faced with overwhelming odds. Instead, the humans were behaving like a species that had evolved to thrive under impossible circumstances. They were treating the Dominion's technological and numerical advantages not as insurmountable obstacles, but as challenges to overcome through innovation, determination, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving a priority message from Dominion High Command." Admiral Kethvar activated his private command channel, dreading what he was about to hear. The image of Supreme Admiral Vorthake appeared on his screen, all four eyes focused with laser intensity. "Admiral Kethvar, your reports from the human campaign have been reviewed by the Dominion Council. Explain to me how a simple pacification protocol has resulted in the loss of 3 major vessels and failed to achieve surrender after 3 standard weeks." "Sir, the humans are not responding according to established patterns. They appear to be using our attacks as motivation for increased resistance rather than incentive for surrender." "That is impossible. Mathematics is universal. No species can sustain total war against superior odds indefinitely." "Sir, with respect, the humans appear to be unaware of that mathematical principle. They're treating certain defeat as a challenge to be overcome rather than a reason to surrender." Supreme Admiral Vorthake's image flickered with what might have been technological interference or barely controlled rage. "Admiral, I am dispatching the 4th Fleet to your position. You will have overwhelming numerical superiority. Use it to end this absurd resistance immediately. The Dominion cannot allow word of this anomaly to spread to other species." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at a tactical display that showed another wave of human ships approaching. But now he understood the true scope of the problem. The Dominion's expansion had been built on the mathematical certainty that superior force would always triumph over inferior resistance. For 8 centuries, every species they had encountered had eventually accepted the logic of their situation and surrendered. But humanity had just demonstrated that mathematical certainty meant nothing to a species that refused to acknowledge the meaning of impossible odds. And if word of human resistance spread to other Dominion territories, every subjugated species would learn that the invincible Dominion could be fought, could be hurt, could be defied. Admiral Kethvar realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just threatening to win a single battle. They were threatening to destroy the fundamental premise upon which the entire Dominion Empire was built. The arrival of the 4th Fleet should have been the end of human resistance. Admiral Kethvar watched from his bridge as nearly 400 Dominion vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their combined firepower sufficient to sterilize entire star systems. Supreme Admiral Vorthake had not been exaggerating when he promised overwhelming numerical superiority. But, as the massive fleet took position around New Terra, Kethvar couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something unprecedented. "Fleet status," he inquired of his tactical officer. "Sir, combined Dominion forces now total 396 vessels. We have 17 dreadnoughts, 53 heavy cruisers, and more than 200 support ships." "The human fleet." The officer paused, checking his readings twice. "Sir, the human fleet now consists of approximately 800 vessels." Admiral Kethvar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "That's impossible. 6 weeks ago they had 37 ships." "Sir, our intelligence indicates the humans have completely militarized their civilization. Every industrial facility in their territory is now producing warships. They're building vessels at a rate we've never encountered. And, sir, they're not just building them. They're launching them." The tactical display showed the impossible truth. Earth's orbital space was crowded with shipyards working at a frantic pace. New vessels were being completed and launched every few hours, their construction speed defying every principle of safe engineering the Dominion had ever established. What about quality control? Structural integrity? These ships cannot possibly be combat-worthy. Fleet Commander Zelder stepped forward with the expression of someone delivering news that couldn't be believed. "Sir, that's just it. They don't appear to care about traditional quality control. They're building ships designed to fight for hours or days rather than years. They're sacrificing durability for rapid production. Disposable warships, the Admiral murmured. It was a concept that violated every principle of military economics he knew. Worse than that, sir. They're building single-mission vessels. Ships designed to deliver one devastating attack before being destroyed. Ships loaded with nuclear explosives and programmed to ram our largest vessels. Ships that exist only to die, taking Dominion forces with them. This was madness, but it was methodical madness. The humans had apparently abandoned the concept of preserving their military assets in favor of maximum immediate impact. They were treating their ships like ammunition rather than investments. Sir, the communication officer interrupted, "We're receiving a transmission from Supreme Admiral Vorthake." The image of the Fleet Supreme Commander appeared on the main screen, his four eyes studying the tactical situation with obvious displeasure. "Admiral Kethvar, explain to me how a primitive species has managed to achieve numerical parity with the combined First and Fourth Fleets." "Sir, the humans have completely reorganized their society around war production. They're building ships faster than we can destroy them. That level of production is unsustainable. Their society will collapse within months." "Yes, sir, but, in the meantime, they're achieving tactical objectives that shouldn't be possible. And, sir, there's something else." Supreme Admiral Vorthake's expression darkened. "Continue." "The humans aren't fighting to win in the traditional sense. They're fighting to inflict maximum casualties on our forces. Every engagement is designed to trade their losses for ours at increasingly favorable ratios. They're treating this as a war of attrition where they can afford to lose more ships than we can. Mathematical impossibility. No species can sustain losses at a greater rate than their opponent indefinitely. Sir, the humans appear to be betting that they can build ships faster than we can replace our losses. And, preliminary calculations suggest, they may be correct." The silence that followed was filled with the implications of that statement. The Dominion's military superiority was built on the premise that their advanced technology and established infrastructure would always outproduce any potential opponent. The idea that a primitive species could outmanufacture the combined resources of dozens of conquered star systems was beyond rational consideration. "Admiral," Supreme Admiral Vorthake's voice carried a dangerous edge, "you will engage the human fleet immediately and destroy their resistance. I don't care if you have to reduce their homeworld to molten slag. This anomaly ends now." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at a tactical situation that defied 8 centuries of established military doctrine. But, orders were orders, and the mathematics still favored the Dominion. 400 advanced warships against 800 primitive vessels should still result in victory, even if the cost was higher than anticipated. "All ships," he commanded, "engage human forces. Target their largest vessels first. Show these primitives what real military technology can accomplish." The Battle of New Terra began with a spectacular display of Dominion firepower. Particle beams lanced across space, disintegrating human ships with single hits. Quantum missiles tracked their targets with perfect accuracy, delivering payloads that reduced entire vessels to expanding clouds of plasma. For the first hour, it looked like a traditional Dominion victory. Human ships died in dozens, their primitive weapons barely scratching Dominion shields. The mathematical certainty of superior technology seemed to be asserting itself. Then, the humans did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or requesting terms, the surviving human ships accelerated directly toward the Dominion fleet. Not in a desperate charge, but in a coordinated assault that showed they had learned from every previous engagement. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "human ships are using swarm tactics. They're coordinating their attacks to overwhelm individual Dominion vessels." Admiral Kethvar watched in growing alarm as groups of human ships focused their fire on single Dominion targets. While the individual human weapons were inferior, concentrated fire from dozens of ships was beginning to overload even advanced Dominion defensive systems. Adjust formation. Increase defensive spacing. But, the humans adjusted too. Their ships split into smaller groups, using hit-and-run tactics that took advantage of their superior numbers. When Dominion ships moved to engage one group, other human vessels would attack from different vectors. "Sir," Fleet Commander Zelvar reported, we've lost the heavy cruiser inevitable victory. Human forces coordinated a ramming attack with 17 vessels simultaneously. 17 ships to destroy one cruiser. By any reasonable calculation, it was a favorable trade ratio for the Dominion. Except the humans seemed to have an unlimited supply of ships willing to make that trade. Casualty report. Sir, we've destroyed approximately 200 human vessels. They've destroyed or critically damaged 23 Dominion ships. The mathematics were still in the Dominion's favor, but Admiral Kethvar found himself calculating something that had never been necessary before: replacement rates. The Dominion could build new ships, but it took months or years. The humans were building new ships every day. Sir, the sensor officer called out, massive hyperspace signatures detected. Multiple contacts incoming. Admiral Kethvar expected to see Dominion reinforcements. Instead, his tactical display filled with new human vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel. Not dozens, but hundreds. Where did they come from? Sir, appears to be the human homeworld. They've launched what can only be described as their entire reserve fleet. The tactical display updated with the new contacts. Earth had apparently emptied its orbital shipyards, launching every vessel that could mount weapons. The arriving fleet included ships that were clearly still under construction, their hulls incomplete but their weapon systems functional. They're launching unfinished ships, Admiral Kethvar whispered in disbelief. Sir, analysis of the human vessels suggests they've abandoned all safety protocols. These ships are barely spaceworthy, but they're armed and crewed. The humans appear to be throwing everything they have at us regardless of readiness or survivability. The human fleet now outnumbered Dominion forces by more than 3-1. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the realization that this was exactly what the humans had planned. They had never intended to defeat the First Fleet. They had used those weeks of fighting to gather intelligence, develop new tactics, and prepare for the arrival of Dominion reinforcements. Every ship lost had been a deliberate sacrifice to buy time for this moment. Sir, the communication officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander. Terms of surrender? No, sir. It appears to be a general broadcast to all vessels. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, professional, and utterly confident. It belonged to someone who believed absolutely in what they were about to do. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet. Dominion vessels, you came to our system believing you would find a species that would calculate odds and surrender when faced with superior force. You expected us to behave rationally, to accept defeat when the mathematics became clear. What you fail to understand is that humans have never been rational about impossible odds. We see them as challenges, not insurmountable obstacles. 6 weeks ago, you fired the opening shot of this war believing it would end with our immediate surrender. Instead, you gave us something we've always excelled at, a reason to fight harder than anyone thought possible. Today, you face the consequences of that miscalculation. You want to see what Relentless looks like? You're about to find out. The human fleet attack began immediately after the transmission ended, but it wasn't the desperate charge Admiral Kethvar expected. It was a coordinated assault that showed the humans had spent 6 weeks learning everything they could about Dominion tactics, technology, and weaknesses. Human ships moved in formations designed to minimize the effectiveness of Dominion weapons. They used electronic warfare systems that somehow interfered with Dominion targeting computers. Most disturbing of all, they employed suicide tactics with the precision of a surgical instrument, sacrificing exact numbers of ships to achieve specific tactical objectives. Sir, the tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, the humans are systematically targeting our command vessels. They're trading multiple ships to eliminate our fleet coordination. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as human kamikaze attacks took out one Dominion command ship after another. The humans were deliberately destroying their own vessels to cripple Dominion fleet coordination, accepting catastrophic losses to achieve strategic advantages. This is impossible, Fleet Commander Zeldar gasped. No species fights like this. The psychological cost alone should break their morale. But the human ships kept coming, wave after wave, each one piloted by beings who had apparently accepted their own deaths as the price of victory. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to ensure the Dominion paid the highest possible price for every meter of space. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, detecting massive energy signatures from the human homeworld. "Something big is happening there." The long-range display showed Earth blazing with energy readings that exceeded anything in the Dominion database. Whatever the humans had been building during the weeks of fighting, it was now coming online. And Admiral Kethvar realized with cold certainty that the humans had been preparing for this moment from the very beginning. They hadn't just been building ships. They had been building something much, much worse. The energy readings from Earth defied every principle of physics that Admiral Kethvar understood. Whatever the humans had constructed around their homeworld was drawing power equivalent to a medium-sized star, channeling it through structures that shouldn't have been capable of containing such forces. "Analysis," he demanded, though part of him dreaded the answer. "Sir," the xeno-engineering officer's voice carried a tremor that spoke of calculations that refused to make sense. "The humans appear to have constructed a planetary-scale weapons system. The power requirements suggest, sir, they've somehow weaponized their entire solar system." The tactical display shifted to show Earth's solar system in its entirety. What Admiral Kethvar saw there violated every assumption about human technological capability. Massive structures surrounded not just Earth, but extended throughout the solar system. Orbital platforms around Jupiter were clearly some form of power collection system. Structures near the Sun itself appeared to be harvesting stellar energy on an impossible scale. "How long have they been building this?" "Sir, analysis suggests construction began immediately after our first contact with their species. They've spent the entire time we've been observing them preparing for this moment." The implications hit Admiral Kethvar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't stumbled into conflict with the Dominion. They had been preparing for it. Every moment of apparent primitive development had been deliberate misdirection while they constructed something that could challenge the technological superiority the Dominion had relied on for 8 centuries. "Sir," Fleet Commander Zelvar approached with the careful movements of someone delivering potentially terminal news, "our intelligence analysis suggests the humans have been studying us since first contact. They've observed our expansion patterns, analyzed our military doctrine, and specifically designed their preparations to counter Dominion advantages." "That's impossible. They're a primitive species. They shouldn't have the technological foundation to understand our capabilities, much less counter them." "Sir, the evidence suggests otherwise. The humans appear to be remarkably gifted at what they call reverse engineering. They've used our own technological demonstrations against us, analyzing our weapons signatures to develop countermeasures." The battle around New Terra was intensifying, but Admiral Kethvar found his attention focused on the growing energy readings from Earth. Whatever the humans had built, it was approaching activation. And the power levels suggested something that could affect targets across interstellar distances. "Sir," the communication officer interrupted, "priority transmission from Supreme Admiral Vorthake." The image of the fleet Supreme Commander appeared, but his usual composed authority was replaced by barely controlled urgency. "Admiral Kethvar, we have a problem. Our monitoring stations throughout Dominion space are reporting massive human fleet movements. The species has mobilized far beyond what should be possible for their technological and economic base." "Sir, how is that relevant to our current engagement?" "Admiral, the humans haven't just mobilized their local forces. They've apparently been building a secret fleet throughout their territory for the past decade. Our estimates suggest they have over 10,000 vessels ready for deployment." Admiral Kethvar's mandibles snapped shut in shock. 10,000 vessels? The entire Dominion fleet numbered barely 3,000 ships, accumulated over centuries of careful construction and technological advancement. "Sir, that's impossible. Our intelligence indicated limited human industrial capacity." "Our intelligence was wrong, Admiral. The humans have been deliberately concealing their true capabilities while preparing for a war we assumed would never happen. And, Admiral, that's not the worst part." Supreme Admiral Vorthake's image flickered, whether from technical interference or barely controlled emotion. "We've received communications from subjugated species throughout Dominion territory. Word of human resistance has spread. Other species are beginning to question our mathematical certainty of victory. The full scope of the disaster was beginning to become clear. The Dominion's expansion had been built on the premise that resistance was futile when faced with overwhelming technological superiority. But humanity had just demonstrated that technological superiority could be overcome through determination, innovation, and careful preparation. "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted, "the energy readings from Earth are spiking. Whatever they've built, it's about to activate." Admiral Kethvar turned his attention back to the immediate battle, but the human fleet around New Terra had changed its tactics yet again. Instead of pressing their attack, they were withdrawing to minimum safe distance. Every human ship was moving away from the Dominion fleet with obvious urgency. "Are they retreating?" "No, sir. They appear to be clearing the target area." The Admiral felt his secondary brain calculating probabilities he didn't want to consider. The humans were pulling back because they were about to deploy something that required their own forces to maintain safe distance. Something that could affect targets at the range of the Dominion fleet. "All ships," he commanded, "prepare for immediate hyperspace jump. Emergency withdrawal protocols." But, before the order could be executed, space around Earth began to distort in ways that violated every principle of physics Admiral Kethvar thought he understood. The structures the humans had built around their homeworld weren't just collecting energy. They were manipulating spacetime itself. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice cracked with panic, "the humans have somehow weaponized faster than light travel. They're creating artificial wormholes targeted at our fleet positions." The space around the Dominion fleet began opening with tears in reality itself. Through those impossible apertures came weapons that shouldn't have existed, projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed, energy beams channeled across interstellar distances, and, most terrifying of all, some form of matter transmission system that was delivering nuclear explosives directly inside Dominion ships. Shields up. Evasive maneuvers. But there was no evading weapons that ignored the normal limitations of space and distance. Dominion ships began exploding as nuclear devices materialized inside their hulls. Energy beams that originated from Earth's solar system struck targets with pinpoint accuracy across impossible distances. "Sir," Fleet Commander Zelva reported through the chaos, "we've lost 17 ships in the first minute of the human attack. Their weapons are bypassing our shields by materializing inside our defensive perimeters." Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as the mathematical certainty of the situation reversed itself. The Dominion fleet, which moments before had possessed overwhelming firepower, was being systematically destroyed by weapons that operated according to principles that shouldn't have been possible. "How are they doing this?" "Sir, analysis suggests the humans have developed some form of instantaneous matter transmission. They're using their entire solar system as a weapons platform with unlimited range and perfect accuracy." The battle was no longer a conflict between fleets. It had become a demonstration of what happened when a species that refused to acknowledge impossible odds was given enough time to prepare for war. The humans hadn't just built ships to fight the Dominion. They had built technologies that made conventional fleet combat obsolete. "Sir," the communication officer called out, receiving transmission from the human fleet commander. Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers with the calm confidence of someone who had just fundamentally changed the nature of warfare. "Admiral Kethvar, you are hereby ordered to surrender your remaining forces immediately. Further resistance will result in the complete destruction of your fleet. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Dominion. We do not surrender to primitive species. Admiral, look at your tactical display. You've lost 40% of your fleet in 3 minutes. Our weapons can target every ship in your formation simultaneously. You have 2 choices, surrender now, or we demonstrate why continuing this fight would be a fatal error in judgment." Admiral Kethvar looked at his tactical display and saw the impossible truth. The human weapons had perfect accuracy across interstellar distances. They could strike any target they chose with weapons that bypassed every known defensive system. The Dominion's technological superiority meant nothing against adversaries who had rewritten the fundamental rules of combat. "Sir," Fleet Commander Zelvar approached with the expression of someone who had witnessed the impossible, "our remaining ships are requesting permission to surrender." The Admiral stared at the tactical display where his proud fleet was being systematically dismantled by technologies that shouldn't have existed. For 8 centuries, the Dominion had expanded through mathematical certainty. They had faced species after species, always confident that superior technology and overwhelming force would result in inevitable victory. But they had never faced a species that treated impossible odds as an engineering problem to be solved. Sir, the xenopsychologist stepped forward. Preliminary analysis suggests the humans have been preparing for this conflict since they first became aware of our existence. They've used the time we spent observing them to study us, to understand our capabilities, and to develop specific countermeasures for our advantages. They planned this entire scenario? Sir, it appears so. The humans allowed us to begin the conflict when and where they chose, using our own attack as the justification for deploying weapons systems they had been preparing for years. We didn't attack them, Admiral. They lured us into attacking them when they were ready. Admiral Kethvar realized with growing horror that everything had been carefully orchestrated. The humans had never been the primitive species struggling to understand their place in the galaxy. They had been apex predators studying their prey, preparing for the moment when they would reveal their true capabilities. Sir, the communication officer announced, Admiral Chen is transmitting again. Admiral Kethvar, you have 10 seconds to order your fleet to stand down. After that, we demonstrate what happens to species that fire opening shots at humanity. Your choice. Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge at officers who had never contemplated the possibility of defeat. For 8 centuries, the Dominion had been the predator in every encounter. They had never faced a species that was more dangerous than they were. But the humans had just demonstrated that they weren't just more dangerous. They were more dangerous in ways that made the Dominion's 8 centuries of military superiority completely irrelevant. All ships, Admiral Kethvar commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of certainty collapsing, stand down. Prepare for surrender negotiations. But, even as he gave the order, Admiral Kethvar knew that the true horror wasn't the military defeat. It was the realization that humanity had been planning this moment from the beginning, and the demonstration at New Terra was just the opening move in a game whose scope he was only beginning to understand. 6 months after the surrender at New Terra, Admiral Kethvar found himself in a situation he had never imagined possible, sitting across from humans at a negotiation table, not as conqueror to conquered, but as defeated aggressor to victorious defender. The conference room aboard the human vessel Determination was deliberately modest, lacking the overwhelming displays of power the Dominion typically employed in such meetings. Instead, the humans had created an environment that spoke of quiet confidence and methodical preparation. Every detail suggested beings who no longer needed to prove their superiority because they had already demonstrated it beyond question. Admiral Sarah Chen sat across from him, no longer the desperate defender she had appeared to be during those first weeks of conflict. Her bearing now carried the authority of someone who had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Beside her sat individuals whose titles Admiral Kethvar was still learning to understand: Director of Strategic Planning, Chief of Technological Development, and, most ominously, Coordinator of Galactic Relations. Admiral Kethvar, Chen began, we've asked you here to discuss the future of human-Dominion relations. I trust your stay aboard our vessel has been educational. It had been more than educational. It had been a comprehensive demonstration of just how thoroughly the Dominion had underestimated human capabilities. The technology aboard the Determination exceeded Dominion standards in every measurable category. The crew moved with efficiency that spoke of intensive preparation and absolute confidence in their equipment and procedures. Admiral Chen, Kethvar replied carefully, the Dominion Council is prepared to discuss terms for withdrawal from human territory. That's a start, Chen nodded, but withdrawal from our current territory isn't really addressing the fundamental issue, is it? The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. The fundamental issue was that humanity had demonstrated capabilities that made the Dominion's 8th century expansion model obsolete. Word of human victory had indeed spread throughout Dominion territory, exactly as Supreme Admiral Vorthake had feared. 3 subjugated species had already declared independence and successfully repelled Dominion attempts to reassert control. What terms are you proposing? Complete Dominion withdrawal from all territories acquired through the pacification protocol, Chen stated calmly. Immediate independence for all species currently under Dominion control. Reparations for damages inflicted during conquest campaigns. and establishment of the Galactic Accord for peaceful coexistence. Admiral Kefvar's secondary brain struggled to process the scope of what was being demanded. Admiral Chen, you're describing the dissolution of the Dominion Empire. Yes, she replied without hesitation. We are. That's impossible. The Dominion has controlled hundreds of star systems for centuries. The economic and social disruption would be catastrophic. Admiral, the human director of strategic planning interjected, we've spent considerable time studying Dominion administrative records. Your empire isn't actually providing benefits to subjugated species that justify its existence. You're extracting resources and labor while providing minimal technological or cultural advancement in return. Kefvar found himself facing documents that shouldn't have existed, detailed analyses of Dominion economic policies, administrative efficiency reports, and projections for post-independence development of various species. The humans had somehow acquired comprehensive intelligence about the inner workings of the Dominion Empire. How do you have this information? We've been in contact with resistance movements throughout Dominion space for years, Chen explained. While you were observing us as a potential target for conquest, we were learning about your empire from the inside. We know exactly how your system works, Admiral, and we know it can be dismantled without the catastrophic consequences you're suggesting. The scope of human preparation was becoming clearer. They hadn't just prepared for military resistance. They had planned for the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. Admiral Chen, Kefvar said slowly, you're proposing to liberate hundreds of species across thousands of star systems. The logistical complexity alone has been planned for extensively, the coordinator of galactic relations interrupted. We've established communication networks with independence movements on 47 worlds. We've developed economic transition plans for post-Dominion infrastructure. We've even prepared technological assistance packages to help newly independent species establish their own defensive capabilities. Admiral Kefvar stared at the humans across the table, realizing that they had been planning the end of the Dominion Empire since before the first shot was fired at New Terra. The military demonstration had been impressive, but this level of comprehensive preparation was genuinely terrifying. You've been planning galactic revolution. We've been planning galactic liberation, Chen corrected. The Dominion expansion model is based on mathematical intimidation backed by technological superiority. But, Admiral, that only works as long as potential targets believe resistance is futile. Once one species successfully resists, the entire premise collapses. And, if the Dominion refuses these terms? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested depths of determination that made Admiral Kefvar's secondary brain calculate probabilities he didn't want to consider. Admiral, she said quietly, you attacked our people. You destroyed human lives and property. You did this believing we would surrender after a brief demonstration of superior force. What you discovered instead is that humans don't respond to aggression the way other species do. We respond by becoming more dangerous than our attackers ever imagined possible. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of human military deployment. Admiral Kefvar's mandibles clicked involuntarily as he saw the scope of what humanity had prepared. This is our current fleet strength, Chen continued. 12,000 vessels of various configurations, all equipped with the instantaneous targeting systems you experienced at New Terra. We've established military bases in 41 star systems. We've developed weapons platforms capable of striking targets anywhere in the galaxy within minutes of target acquisition. And, Admiral, this represents approximately 10% of our total military capacity. 10%? The demonstration at New Terra was conducted using emergency reserves and hastily converted civilian vessels. Our actual military-industrial complex has been operating at full capacity for the past 6 months. We can build ships faster than any empire in galactic history can destroy them. We can deploy weapons that make conventional fleet combat obsolete. And, most importantly, we can do this indefinitely. The Chief of Technological Development leaned forward. Admiral, humanity has made a fundamental breakthrough in resource utilization and manufacturing efficiency. We can convert entire solar systems into industrial platforms within months. We can establish self-replicating manufacturing facilities that produce exponentially increasing numbers of vessels. The Dominion's expansion was limited by the need to transport resources across interstellar distances. We've solved that limitation. Admiral Kethvar understood with crystalline clarity that he was witnessing the emergence of a species that could outproduce, outfight, and outthink anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans weren't just militarily superior. They had achieved a level of technological and industrial development that made traditional concepts of empire obsolete. What you're describing is galactic domination. No, Admiral Chen shook her head. What we're describing is galactic protection. The Dominion expansion model treats other species as resources to be exploited. Humanity operates on a different principle: strength exists to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She activated another display showing proposed territorial arrangements for liberated Dominion space. We don't want to rule other species, Admiral. We want to ensure they can rule themselves. Every species we liberate will receive technological assistance to establish their own defensive capabilities. We're not building an empire. We're building a network of independent civilizations capable of mutual defense. And, if species choose not to join this network? Then, they remain independent, Chen replied immediately. Membership in the Galactic Accord is voluntary. Any species that wants to remain isolated is free to do so. Any species that wants to develop their own expansion policies is free to try, as long as they don't involve conquest of unwilling populations. Admiral Kethvar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, a species with the power to dominate everything they encountered, choosing instead to liberate it. The Dominion Council will never accept these terms. Then, the Dominion Council will discover what happens when they refuse reasonable offers, Chen replied. Admiral, we could have destroyed your entire fleet at New Terra. We could have followed up by systematically eliminating every Dominion military installation in the galaxy. We chose not to, because we believe in giving people opportunities to make better choices. But, that opportunity isn't indefinite? No, it isn't. Shen's voice carried absolute conviction. Admiral, your people fired the opening shot of this conflict believing it would end with our immediate surrender. Instead, you've awakened something that will reshape galactic civilization. The question now is whether that reshaping happens through negotiation and cooperation, or whether it happens through the complete military dismantlement of the Dominion Empire. Admiral Kethvar looked around the room at humans who had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in 8 centuries of Dominion expansion. They had planned, prepared, and positioned themselves to fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. You've already won, he said quietly. Yes, Chen acknowledged. The question is what kind of victory it becomes. We prefer one where former Dominion species remember human intervention as liberation rather than conquest. But, Admiral, make no mistake, the Dominion Empire as it currently exists ends here. The only choice your council has is whether it ends through negotiation or through force. Admiral Kethvar realized that he would be returning to the Dominion Council with news that would shatter 8 centuries of certainty. The humans hadn't just defeated the Dominion militarily. They had made the entire concept of the Dominion Empire obsolete. I'll convey your terms to the Council, he said finally. Thank you, Admiral. And, Admiral, when you brief the Council, please make sure they understand one critical point. Humans don't seek galactic domination because we don't need to. We've already achieved something far more valuable, the capability to help other species achieve their own potential. The Dominion sought to control the galaxy through fear. Humanity offers to protect it through strength. As Admiral Kethvar prepared to leave the human vessel, he understood that he was witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Dominion had ruled through mathematical certainty and technological superiority. Humanity ruled through something far more dangerous, the absolute conviction that every species deserved the chance to determine its own destiny, backed by the military and technological capacity to make that conviction reality. The galaxy would never be the same.